Hi, my name's Arman, and you're listening to Tiny Synths and Friends. Let's explore the curious world of tabletop music devices designed by individuals with a deep desire to create something personal. In this episode, I'll be talking with Toby from Rainy Day Electronic Instruments in Colorado, USA, creator of the Hailstorm percussion sequencer and a number of other synths and devices. Let's take a listen. Hi, Toby. Welcome to the show. I'd like to begin by asking you about when you became interested in music.
Probably like in high school, I would say. Late 90s. Yeah, I just started getting into like underground hip hop and kind of felt like I might be able to start making beats and stuff. So that was kind of when I started recording and like writing music was like late 90s, early 2000s.
So what were some of the artists that were inspiring to you?
There was a underground label called Anticon. I actually still have this beanie I was just wearing. It was like an Anticon beanie from like 20 years ago. Yeah, mostly that label was like a huge influence on me. Because it's kind of strange. It's like kind of weird hip hop. It's not exactly like traditional hip hop. So yeah, there was a lot of like weird electronic stuff going on with it as well. So
when you were getting into that hip hop, were you performing at all? Were you creating music?
Yeah, I probably started performing, I don't know, a couple of years into it, just doing like open mics at coffee shops. I'm from Fort Collins, which is like 60 miles north of Denver. There still is a place called the Alley Cat, and it's just like a coffee shop. I had open mics every Friday. Yeah, I had a friend that played guitar, and he would play those, and he just kind of encouraged me to start playing them. Pretty much every week I would play that, and then there was like another open mic that I played as well. And then I would get random shows as well, like at bigger venues. Yeah, it wasn't long before I was actually playing shows. I don't know if I should have been playing shows. I didn't really know what I was doing, but...
What were you playing? What was your setup like at that point?
So I had like an old iPod, I think, that was playing backing tracks, but... So I was starting to get into like circuit bending as well at that time. So I had like an old Casio and some just Sesame Street toys that I had like taken apart and circuit bent. So like the beginning of my set, I would always just start out by doing like this 5-minute noise jam with like all the circuit bent stuff, which probably a lot of people off, especially at the coffee shop. Yeah, so I'd start with that, and then I'd kind of go into my more like hip hop songs, which were mostly just backing tracks from the iPod, and then I'd sometimes play a little Casio along with them.
Circuit bending in my mind kind of comes around with the Speak and Spell, right? And I had a Speak and Spell when it was like,
yeah,
for real, like when it came out in the 80s, and I remember I must have plugged it into the wrong power adapter because I just like turned it on this one day, and it just started saying all this crazy kind of half demonic stuff. And it only did that one time, and like basically nobody ever believed me again. Years later, you know, in the 2000s, it became popular to circuit bend, Speak and Spells, and I was like, this is real. Like it took me 20 years or something, but I ended up being justified.
Yeah, that's where I got my start. Just ripping open old Casios and trying to make connections where there wasn't and seeing what would happen. So,
do you still have any of those old circuit bent devices?
Yeah, I probably have almost all of them. I don't know if they work at all anymore, but yeah, like if you go way back on my YouTube timeline, you can like see a circuit bending video from like probably 2006 or something. That is what I used to use to play those coffee shops.
So basically, your first musical instruments were circuit bent devices?
Yeah, pretty much.
That's great.
I was circuit bending for a while, and then I kind of wanted to make my own MIDI controllers, which was kind of like my first like coding exercises with like microcontrollers and stuff. So I got like an Arduino, and yeah, I kind of started making MIDI controllers first just to control. I don't even know. I think it was definitely for all the stuff that I make is always come from a place of like performing live. So the circuit bending stuff was all for my live set. I was really into iPad music stuff for a while. So I was making MIDI controllers to control synths and stuff that are for my iPad. And then I think from there, I always used Teensy microcontrollers, and they introduced the audio library, and that was kind of like my first realization that I could make like an oscillator or something just by coding it to like kind of like help me transition from just making MIDI controllers into things that actually make sound. Yeah, it was a lot to do with just the Teensy audio library and the accessibility of it.
A lot of people got their start with working in Arduino. Are you still working in Arduino?
I mean, I started with an Arduino just doing a MIDI controller, but then I think I originally moved to Teensy when it was like Teensy 2.0 was the new one, and it could do like native USB MIDI, and I don't think the Arduino could at the time, like the standard Arduino Mega or whatever it was. So yeah, I think that's when I switched from the Arduino to start using Teensy. It was for that reason, and then I just kind of got used to it and used it forever.
What was the first thing you ever soldered?
It was definitely a circuit bend thing.
Hooking the soldering iron into a Casio keyboard and seeing what happened.
And I was also, I was doing a Atari Punk console. So you're familiar with that?
For sure. I have an unbuilt one somewhere.
I think it's an old circuit. I don't know. I found it online way back in the day. So,
and it's pretty much just a noise machine. Like it's kind of out of control. I should probably build mine. What's the chip in there? I can't even remember.
I think it's just a 555.
Yeah, it's a really basic circuit.
Yeah, that like I don't know if you can see that weird baby thing in the background of.
Yes, I see a baby out of a box and arms and legs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, there's an Atari Punk console in there, and the arms actually like move the pulse width and the pitch and stuff. Yeah, I was making those, I think, at the same time that I was doing circuit bending stuff. So that was, I guess, kind of a weird intermediary before I started getting into actual building synths. But yeah, I made those and put them in weird wood boxes and stuff and sold those.
So you started making stuff in Arduino. Were you selling those early MIDI controllers, or were they just for your own use?
I always have to look back on my YouTube timeline to like figure out when I was doing certain things because I never remember. So I had made this looper patch in Pure Data that I was playing live with on an iPad because there's this app called Mobu Plat where you can load in Pure Data patches and you can make a little interface for them and stuff. So I'd made this whole like looping live setup on my iPad. And then I realized like Raspberry Pi could run Pure Data. So I was like, oh, I could potentially make a hardware thing of this. So I don't even know how long it took, but I spent a lot of time building this whole live looping piece of hardware that had like internal synthesizers and like a sampling kind of drum machine thing. And I posted a video of that on YouTube, and I don't know what happened, but like it must have caught on somewhere and it just like exploded and like a ton of people saw it, and it just kept getting more and more views. People started asking for, if I was selling them and stuff, and I was like, no, like, and I hadn't even like made a schematic for it or anything. It was all point-to-point wiring, like, so people were trying to like build it, and I was just like, here's the awful code I wrote for it, and here's like as best I can remember it was all hooked up. So it was like a Raspberry Pi, and then there was a Teensy, some version of a Teensy doing all of the controls. And I think I was using Serial to communicate with the Raspberry Pi running Pure Data, but I was still working, and I didn't really have any need for additional income or anything, and it was all just for fun anyway. So eventually I started learning like PCB design a little bit. Like I just taught myself as best I could figure out. had a job for like 12 years doing front-end web development, but we were like a small company. We got acquired, and then they just laid off everyone like a couple of years ago. So at the time I was working, I was still building like synths and stuff for myself. And yeah, when I got into PCB design, like the minimum order was like 5 boards. So I was like, what am I going to do with these other 4? My early projects that I sold that are on the site, there's only 4 of those ever made for sale besides the one that I had. Everything up until the Cirrus 2, which was like, I did 10 of those. That was like my biggest run I'd ever done. I didn't really have to do it, but I did kind of want people to experience them. Yeah, when I got laid off last year, I decided to finally be like, okay, maybe I should try to actually make this company a real thing.
Well, your aesthetic is very unique and seems to revolve around wood. How did that come about?
Yeah, it was just like a nice looking enclosure, like, so I got a 3D printer a long time ago, probably like 6 or 7 years ago. And my idea was kind of to use that to make enclosures for these projects. And it was fine, but I just never was satisfied with the look of it. I tried like doing post-processing stuff with it, just make it look nicer, but I was just never totally happy with it. And then I got a CNC machine, just kind of learned how to use that. And I just really like the look of wood enclosures. So I kind of just stuck with that.
How long does it take to CNC like one enclosure?
It really depends on the design. I'm actually using a laser cutter now. Some of the old ones I did kind of the same way you would do it on a laser cutter, just like panels and then gluing them together.
And you're doing all the manufacturing yourself?
Yeah.
Well, that seems pretty time consuming.
It is. And I'm kind of right now, actually, this next project I'm working on, I'm trying to figure out ways to make the project still look good, but not take as much time. But yeah, my idea for the new one is to kind of 3D print the basic enclosure, like on the Hailstorm. All the parts that are wood would be like a 3D printed thing, and then do some wooden cheeks on the sides that cover up quite a bit of it. Yeah, like the CNC stuff is great, and it's like, I like the way it looks. It's just, I'm trying to kind of cut down a little bit on the wood that are in my projects.
Yeah, soldering and CNC, yeah, you got to have like a nice mask for all that stuff.
Yeah, mine's in my garage. I just opened the garage door completely and just put a big fan going.
A lot of the archived synths that you've made seem to have cloud names. What's going on with the cloud names?
The company name is Rainy Day Electronic Instruments. So I was kind of just trying to do clouds. I don't know. I'm a big fan of rainy days. I just like when weather is bad. I don't know. I feel like I'm really productive on those days, which is weird. I feel like it's like as a day that a lot of people like want to relax or not do anything. And for some reason that to me makes me want to like do more stuff. I don't know why.
What informs your design choices? You're not using screens frequently, maybe in a few devices, but not all.
Yeah.
What makes you make a device the way it is?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's just like usability is a big thing. So like quick access to stuff. And I say that, and my new project is like an insanely crazy mod matrix thing. But in the past, I've done a lot of, this is actually the next thing I'm making is actually something I'm actually not making for live use specifically. So, but in the past, a lot of the things have been, the idea of getting something down quick. I used to have this little drum thing that I built that had a Nintendo DS touchscreen. I'm not good with finger drumming stuff, so this idea of just like moving your finger around this surface to create patterns really quick, so you can like record that really quick live, and then you can do a lot of modulation on the sound of it and everything. Yeah, some of it's just like what is around my studio at the time. Like, I don't know, just like have stuff around that I ordered from projects that I never ended up using. So like, just interested in like a touch sensor thing and like what can I do with that. So a lot of my last projects have used touch sensors because it's just so quick and you can slide your finger around and like change things, and it's also cheap. Like you don't have to have a button for that. It's just a touch plate.
For a touch plate, type design, you're reading basically just kind of coordinates or location or...
Yeah, so like Hailstorm in particular, it's using it's a MPR 121, so it's like an electrode touch thing. So every little square is kind of just like its own on or off kind of thing. It was based on the old Nintendo DS touchscreen, so that was a little different. I kind of had to grid that out into like coordinates to where like each little section would be like a specific time division or whatever.
The Hailstorm is your current active product. I purchased one. It is a very well-made device. I'm looking at it right now. It's pretty small, fits in your hand. There's 4 knobs across the top, a number of tactile switches down the left and across the bottom, and the centerpiece is really this 6 by 4 grid of these backlit touch plates. They change functionality based on what mode you're in. So describe to me, what is the Hailstorm? How do you describe it when someone says, what is this thing?
I kind of say it's just like a sample-based touch sequencer. I'm sure there's stuff like it out there, but I don't really know of anything. You basically create rhythms just by using these kind of touch sliders to where the rhythm is just a division or a multiplication of the overall clock. And then there's like some shuffling features and stuff like that.
It's a percussion sequencer, so you can get melodies out of it. It has an SD card, micro SD for sample loading. It's very performative, and I would describe it as very modern because you're doing a lot of slicing and retriggering and things that I think are more modern than retro, right? Like this isn't something that's calling back. This is something that's looking forward. So if you're looking for something percussive in your setup, it could be a good option. It has reverb. And it has some non-traditional kind of effects in there. I mean, as a filter, but it does have some kind of, they're not granular delays, but there's something, they're not just your standard delay.
Yeah, it's just like a really tight delay line that when you can modulate the position of the delay. So it's just like tons of feedback on a tight delay line, which can make like a kind of crazy tearing sort of sound.
It has a very specific and unique flavor to it.
Yeah.
It's super cool. I really enjoy it.
Thanks.
The design, like the physical design of it, all the pieces are just almost flawlessly put together. I don't know how you lined up all the I/O in the back so perfectly.
A lot of trial and error.
So was the Hailstorm your first sample-based synth?
Yeah, I think so.
It loads the samples from the SD card, right? So there, because you're using a teensy.
It's a 4.1, so it grabs the sample. Like when you first boot it up, it grabs the samples and loads them into RAM. Teensy 4.1s have that PS RAM that you can solder onto it, so it's like 8 megabytes. That's kind of the maximum size of all the samples and stuff. So it grabs them and loads them into RAM, so you can do the pitch shifting and stuff like that, and it's like immediate access to it.
How many iterations did you go through when developing the Hailstorm?
That one's kind of hard because it's based on a really old thing, so I don't know if I would count like the old iterations of it. There was at least 3 different PCB designs that were mostly like interface designs. Like I just like would add more modes or like more buttons or something on each one. I was going to scrap the project entirely, and then I was going to do something else, and then I came back to it because I don't know. When I was first deciding to start like Rainy Day as an actual company, I had the Hailstorm was one product, and then I had this thing I'm working on right now, which is like this crazy looping sampler synthesizer thing. And it was kind of between those two that I wasn't sure which one I was going to put out. And it was originally Hailstorm, and then I was like, no, I want to do this other one. And I started working on that. And then I think I probably flip-flopped like 4 times, and I finally landed on, okay, Hailstorm's going to be the one that I'm going to actually put out because it's a little cheaper, it's a little less involved, and I think it's just, there's so much you have to use that you don't even kind of realize at the beginning, which is just like, oh, I have to actually make a manual. I think Hailstorm is the first thing I did that actually has a manual because everything else, like I said, was like a run of 4 units, and I would just make a video and be like, hey, just watch the video. It'll show you how to use it. I think Cirrus, which was my FM synth, I think there was like a 1-page, really simple, like get you started kind of manual.
One-page manual for an FM synth.
Right. Well, it's a pretty simple FM synth. It's not crazy 6 operator thing. It's only, yeah.
That one has, as I can see it, has the little display that's blue on the bottom and yellow at the top. Yeah, I love that one. I don't know why. I just love that one. I played with that. I had like, I can't even remember what I was going to put it into a couple years ago when I, found some somewhere and was playing around with them. It's just so strange that, like,
I know.
Hey, let's just make a display that's like 16 pixels of yellow at the top and the rest is blue.
Right.
I love it.
It sort of makes sense if you use it like sort of as a header, like, because it differentiates it from, that's kind of what I did in the Cirrus synth. It was like, okay, this is like the page you're on or whatever. So yeah, it is kind of weird that it's really ubiquitous too. That screen is everywhere.
So when you're building your stuff, what kind of gear do you use to test your prototypes with? Like other companies' stuff, or?
I do like I have like Volcas and stuff, pocket operators. So when I kind of decided to make something as small as the Hailstorm, it's kind of like fits into that whole ecosystem of kind of small musical devices, somewhat portable. I mean, Hailstorm doesn't have a battery, but it's USB powered. So I think there's a couple of Volcas around my house, and then I have a pocket operator, and I use those to test like the sync in and out, because it has that like analog sync in and out.
So who designs your manual and your website?
That was all me.
I figured that seems to be a running theme amongst most makers.
Oh, I'm sure. Like, yeah, there's so much you have to do.
I'm looking for another soul out there that actually enjoys making the manuals for some bizarre reason. It's something that I enjoy doing. And
yeah. Ever since when I had to write that manual for Hailstorm, now that I'm building my new project, I'm just always thinking about the wording of, like, as I'm working on a new feature, I'm like, all right, how am I going to word this in the manual? Like, it really kind of drills home what the thing is that you're even doing. It's kind of like the rubber ducky when you're programming, just explaining it to yourself helps a lot.
Yeah, I tend to go into another, like, I create a fake world when I write a manual, and I kind of overlay that fake world into the manual. And so I think I'm obscuring the already obscure buttons and knobs and switches into a whole other layer. And I don't think I really enjoy it. And I had to pull myself back on my last release of a synth, where my original intention was to write it in kind of a futuristic language that was kind of a cross between religious text and Gen Z speak. And it was and Shakespearean, like this sort of Shakespearean Gen Z futuristic religious speak. And it was going to look like kind of a futuristic Bible or religious text. And I had to roll that one back, because by the time I got 2 or 3 pages in, it was crazy. I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. And it ended up being, even after I turned it back, it's in plain English now, but it's still like over 50 pages. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, I love writing them, but I've got some ideas for some future projects, but it's a creative fiction or nonfiction, kind of both at the same time. The drum engines from Hailstorm, are they coming from an earlier synth?
The drum engine that's inside of it is like, part of it is some of like kind of the stock Teensy audio library. They have like a drum object, which is just like a pretty basic sine wave with a pitch envelope on it. So that is being used, I think, on a couple of the sounds, but all 4 sounds are like layers of a lot of different things. The last one's like an FM thing.
On the device, you have 4 knobs across the top, and one of them is a mix knob.
Yeah.
So you can mix between the sample source and the synth drums.
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen that really on anything.
Yeah, that was kind of like towards the end of the project. It was just going to be all sample based, and then I was like, I started loading in melodic samples, and I was like, well, it'd be cool if I could also have some kind of percussive elements. And I was like, well, maybe I can start putting some drums in this thing that are just built in. They're synthesized drum sounds. it ended up being really fun. Then you can modulate that mix between the left and right. You can record modulation, so it can be part of the performance that you record into the sequence. So
when you're recording your modulations and it plays them back, it's just kind of nice. You get this almost 1970s graphic EQ kind of look
right.
of these dancing meters going up and down. It's great.
Knight Rider.
So are you making all the units by hand, or is some of it done at the factory?
I think the first batch of them, I'm pretty sure everything was like through hole and I soldered everything. And then I kind of realized that takes a lot of time. So the second batch, I think there was only like mostly like the buttons and the knobs and the jacks were like really the only thing that I hand soldered on. The thing that takes a lot of time is the wooden case. Cutting it is not too bad. It's just like gluing it, sanding it, finishing it, making sure it's nice and, it's nice and flush everywhere. And I don't know, I take a lot of time with that because I want it to look, good.
What's the wood?
It's walnut.
Walnut, okay.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot in walnut lately.
And the touchpads,
yeah,
they're backlit RGB touchpads. How are you pulling that off? How are we seeing through the PCB?
Inside of it, there's a 3D printed kind of grid. So the LEDs are on the main PCB that's inside. And then there's a grid, kind of a light guide thing that directs all the LEDs to just be in their individual squares. And then the PCB, I don't know the exact process, but a lot of manufacturers do it where they kind of expose the actual PCB material, so you don't have anything over the top. So that's why it's kind of, the colors themselves are kind of get yellowed a little bit as they come through the FR4 material, which is the PCB material. It's basically create a transparent part of the PCB itself, and that's what the cover of the thing is. It's a PCB. So
gotcha. So it's a transparent portion of the PCB.
Yeah, a lot of like Eurorack. I don't know if you're into Eurorack at all, but a lot of modules do that.
No, I can't go there. I can't go to Eurorack. I see you've gone there.
It's kind of like, for me, Eurorack was kind of like, I was starting to go that route anyway. I bought a Make Noise Zero Coast, which is like a semi-modular. It's kind of like it's like an intro to Eurorack pretty much. But yeah, I got that, and then I wanted to get Dreadbox Erebus, which is like a analog kind of duophonic synth, and so I had both of those, and I was like, okay, these are both pretty much Eurorack compatible things, and I'm starting to run out of desk space. So like, if I got a rack, they could be in the rack, and I could, then when I buy new stuff, it'll just go into the rack that I already have, and I don't have to make space for anything. So that was kind of my reasoning to myself that it was okay to get into it, but it's a lot of fun. I make a lot of modules as well. I've never sold a module, but I have an entire live case of all of my own designed Eurorack modules that I play with.
Do you perform live still?
There was kind of a period where I didn't for a little while. I moved to Denver, and I don't know. When I was in Fort Collins, I was playing a lot just because I kind of came up there playing shows, and I knew everybody there, and so I moved to Denver about, I don't know, was it like 10 years ago or something now? And I kind of I played shows for a little while, and then I guess also COVID happened, and then it was like, okay, all the venues are gone. Nobody's really doing anything anymore. And that's kind of when I stopped. I hadn't played for quite a while. And then when I started getting into Eurorack, there's a company, WMD here, and they put on this monthly kind of open mic for Eurorack. They've been doing it for 8 years or something. So I went to that, and I was like, okay, this is cool. And I'm into Eurorack a lot, so I'm going to make an entire Eurorack live setup. I'm going to make all the modules, and I'm going to play. And so I did, and I've played there a couple of times at the Freak Boutique.
Blood on my hands, heart on my heels, caged like an old broken man. Those are the days that I found a place to put these feelings that I can.
Yeah, it's a lot different than my old sets. When it was my old sets were pretty much all hip hop stuff, and I was rapping on all the song, every song. And now when I do the Freak Boutiques, I have I don't know, I guess it's 50-50 instrumental stuff, and then like vocal stuff. So yeah, and it's, it's different. It's open mic. I'm only playing for 15 minutes, so it's kind of fun because it's it's like a one-off performance that I practice that and then pull all the bench cables when it's over, and that's the one time that's gonna happen. So it's kind of cool.
So what are you working on now?
It's like this 4-track kind of looper sample based. It's sample based, just like Hailstorm, but it's kind of like having 4 different tape machines going. And you can modulate start and end points of where they're looping, like the speed of them, and you can put the loop points so tight that you're basically turning the samples into like single cycle waveforms, and then you can play it melodically as like MIDI input, and it also has an onboard keyboard. Yeah, it kind of started out as just a loop-based, like kind of ambient machine where I'd load in, like, I don't know, like a piano loop or something, and then just set these 4 different tracks kind of drifting in and out of sync with each other and at different speeds and stuff. And it creates like, you can basically record in like just a couple of notes from a piano, and then depending on how you have them being played back, you can create this crazy, cool atmospheric thing. And that's sort of how it started out, as just that, and then I started adding the ability to modulate like everything about it. It has this insane mod matrix where it's got, I think it has like 8 sources and then like 36 destinations, and every source can go to every destination at the same time in varying amounts, so it can get really, really crazy. Like each voice has a couple envelopes and 2 LFOs, and like they can all modulate each other. It's a really cool thing. Like, I'm really excited about this new thing. It's definitely the most complicated, or like the most complex sounds of anything I've ever built, just because of how you can interact with the samples and stuff. Like, and you can have like 2 of the tracks like zoomed in on a tiny portion of the wave, so it's like a wavetable kind of, or like just a single cycle waveform, and then you can have 2 of the other tracks droning on like a larger portion of the sample. So you can essentially have like a part of the sample that's like a drum loop, and just like have a drum loop and then like another track doing something else, and then a couple of tracks you're playing like melodically. So they're all like, all 4 tracks can be completely independent, or they can be played together.
So it's like a tape looper. And I've seen in your Instagram feed, you had some, breadboarded devices that maybe had a tape loop-ish looking graphic. Is some of that getting pulled from there?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, depending on what it was, that the funny thing is that like specific tape graphic that I've used on like actually a couple different projects. But if you scroll through some of the old breadboard stuff, a lot of that is different iterations of this current project that I'm working on. If it's like tape warbly sounding things, it's probably an older version of what I'm working on right now. So just like a couple weeks ago, I'm just on YouTube, and there's this Eurorack module that's like this looper, and it popped up on my feed, and I watched it, and I was like, oh my God, this is so much of what I'm working on right now. Like, somebody had already come out with a Eurorack module of it. It really bummed me out, because I've been working on this, like I said, it's an old project. I started I think 7 years ago or something was the original one. I don't know, it's just like always a bummer when that happens, and that's happened to me before. Like, I'll have an idea and I'll be working on it, and then suddenly I see it and I'm just like, oh no, I wasn't fast enough to get it out. But I don't know, I mean, it's kind of a different world, like Eurorack people and like folks that are buying kind of small standalone things.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from there. There's a bunch of people out there doing this, and
yeah,
we're all living in the same space and time, and we're going to be seeing these things and get inspired by things. And
right.
So we're all kind of coming from the same pot of ingredients. And
yeah, definitely.
I think there's enough space out there for different takes on devices.
Right.
People's personality comes through, right? Like your
right.
your design decisions, your aesthetic.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. confidence is a hard thing to maintain. And for me, it's like I made it for this thing, and I think it's really good at that thing that it does. If I'm happy enough to use it live, then I'm definitely like happy enough to sell it. Like I think it's obviously something that has value, and it's really cool when you do. And like I'm just starting to experience this with Hailstorm, where you see other people using it in different ways, and it's like that's worth more to me than like the money I got from it. It's just like seeing somebody really enjoying what you built and potentially using it in a completely different way than you ever thought of. That is just like a really cool thing that I'm just not experiencing. I had somebody order a Hailstorm from me that they've been one of my favorite artists for like 25 years. And it was just, I saw the order and I just was like, what? Like, is this real? Yeah, it's this guy Doseone, who was like just a huge influence on my music and my life, really creatively.
This little rapper explains how drugs feel at a party. This little rapper describes some kind of perpetual shopping. This little rapper does what others do, only sloppy. And this little rapper is just someone else's exact copy.
It was such a crazy moment, like such an insane full circle moment.
That sounds amazing. So what are some of your favorite sound making tools right now?
Unfortunately, I haven't really made much music lately. Yeah, like I said, like my live stuff is all stuff that I've built myself, like all my modules. So I am not one to buy many things. Like despite my Eurorack setup back there, like I buy like maybe one module a year. Like it's so rare.
Are there any planned firmware updates for Hailstorm?
You have one from the second batch, so that should be 1.2. The new one is just 2 more features where when you go to the load screen on Hailstorm, you can generally only, right now in this current 1.1, you can only load 12 different sequences and 12 different sets of samples. And this update will allow you to have 4 sets of those, so 4 sets of 12 sequences, 4 sets of 12 sample banks. There is a new mode for when you record the effects, there'll be a probability for that. So like if you recorded like a really heavy in effects sequence, you can, because there's the note probability, it's kind of the same idea for effects where you can turn down the probability that effect will even happen. So yeah, that's the 2 new features in version 1.2, which should be out pretty soon. I was going to probably send out an email soon with it.
What would you tell someone interested in getting into synth making?
Just do it. Yeah, I don't know, because I'm still kind of like, why am I doing it? Like, is this actually going to work for me? Like for me, I'm always working on something, like whether it's going to be a project that I sell or it's going to be something that just goes into my live setup. I just love to do it. So if you have that passion, then just do it. I mean, if you're trying to make a company out of it, I am not the person to like answer that question because I'm brand new to this and it's like a scary new world that I have no idea what I'm doing. So I would say follow your passion if you're interested in this stuff.
This has been Tiny Synths and Friends. Thanks to Toby from Rainy Day Electronic Instruments for spending some time with me on the show, and thank you for listening. Links to all of Rainy Day's relevant social media, shop, and more are located in the description of this episode.